Hey guys, this is Eric Weingartner with Weingartner Racing. I know right now you're thinking, great, another Chevy head. All right, this is a Mopar head. It's a 440 Mopar head. This is the Brodix B1 heads. Now, one of the criticism I get from my channel, and I kind of get it, is you're like, you keep doing Chevy stuff. Can't you do anything else but Chevys? The thing is, it's what comes in. Very rarely does a manufacturer or a company actually send me heads for me to port or show off. And typically when they do, guess what? It's typically Chevy because that's what they sell more of. So as much as you guys would like to see different heads, if they don't come in the shop, I really don't do them. And then some of you are like, well, fine, can you do this weird oddball head? No, I do what makes money too. I'm in the same boat as them. But Mopar guys are die hard, and that's why I love them. If they're Mopar no matter what. Because for their life, people have been saying, you should have done a Chevy. And they're like, I ain't doing it. This, to me, for the 440 Mopar heads, of the ones I've seen, and I have to say I'm pretty limited on the amount of 440 Mopar heads I've seen because of what I just said, these seem to be the baddest ones. They are really, really good. Now, I've ported these, so there's been a lot done to them since then, but let me give you a rundown of the stuff. First off, the chamber, this is a modern chamber. If you look at a traditional 440 Mopar head, you got this big old square notch over here that takes up most of your quench pad. You got the big old open chamber. Not at all modern. This is a much, much better design. So is it the best ever? No, but this is like light years ahead of what the traditional 440 Mopar is. And even several of the aftermarket ones, Mopar 440 heads, their chamber isn't near as good as what this one is. This is a good chamber for them. Valve sizes, this is great. The intake valve is a 2300. The exhaust valve is a 1780. Now, this is also interesting because if you know from this being an inline wedge head, so 440 Mopars, you kind of got a disadvantage. Big block Chevys, you got a canted valve, so the valve moves away from the bore. Their valves are rotated. You're stuck with a wedge head that's inline. Because of that, for the most part, you're kind of limited on your valve side because if you open too much from where the valve was, it actually hit the cylinder bore. This, I'm fairly certain that they moved it back, and they've definitely moved it over. So it allows for a much bigger intake valve. This is about the intake valve you should be running, at least a 2300. So for you, most of you Mopar guys, this is really the one you should be running. So if you think about it, do a big block Chevy. Most of them are 225, 2300 on a 4310 bore. This is a 2300. Excellent. Exhaust valve's 1780, and I know you're thinking, it should be bigger. Big blocks have a 1880. Yeah, big block Chevys, their valve's too big. It's so hard to tell people this. I don't know why they started doing it. I think the original people put in much bigger exhaust valves because they're trying to get the angles in, but it doesn't really need a bigger exhaust valve. This 1780 is perfectly fine for what you're doing. It moves a ton of air. It's really, really good. Now, when I ported these, I put a 50-degree valve job in both intake and exhaust because this guy is going to have some lift. It's going to turn a lot of RPMs, 8,200. This thing, it's going to be good. It's going to be good. I think it's 511 something cubic inch engine, but 50-degree valve job because it's going to have more lift than normal. So does it help hurt low lift flow? You're going to see in a second. Not really, this thing's good. So anyway, let me just show you this side. If you look at it, you're like, I have never ported one of these, and I know you're thinking, well, how did you know what to do? You see this port layout? That's a small block Chevy. It's just a big, small block Chevy. That's what it is. So any of the stuff you do on the small block Chevy, essentially doing this, except for I am going to draw a picture to show you what I mean about these ports, because the guy who designed this initially must have been a Hemi guy, because the ports are designed kind of like a Hemi as far as their slant is, because I haven't seen very much stuff that runs it this way. And I'll get to that later in a minute, but here's what they look like. Nice. And I got to show you a diagram to show you the slant down. And that's that. Let's show you the exhaust side real quick, then I'll show you the flow numbers. Exhaust side, that's big. That's an exhaust port. That's the way it should be. Yeah, buddy. That's good. I worked those over. This took actually a lot of grinding. I think this head was made to be CNC ported, so it was much smaller than normal, especially on the intake ports. So it was a bit of a work. So, but I think I did pretty good. Now I floated on a 4310 bore because that's the bore I have and the bore plate I have for the Mopar. I understand several others have bigger. Matter of fact, most Mopars are probably bigger than this. That's just what I had. So I know it's smaller than what most of you are running. But it is what it is. So really, you're like, enough of your gabbing. Could you tell us what it actually flows? It flows good. So I've loaded on both benches. We'll start off with the Signs. This is my Signs Digital 680. It's probably the most conservative bench. And then I also floated on my Superflow 750. Same bore, everything. No exhaust pipe, by the way. Here's your intake flow. Look at this 400 number, 289, almost 290. That's stout. That keeps up with several of the big block Chevys with a much bigger intake valve. That's good. So 50-degree hurting low lift flow? Don't think so. Look at that, 262 at 200. Yeah, that's well within the range. That's great. At 500, 337, 600, 371, and it tops out about 409 at 750 and then starts backing up, which I'll show you the diagram of why this is happening in a little bit. But that's still 400 CFM, that you got some flow going there, and especially in the low lift areas. So especially in this range, pretty good. Granted, now there are big block Chevys usually are in the 400 CFM range here, but still not bad. Exhaust side, flows peak at 271, kind of backs up there. Probably could have made it a little bit bigger. And then you look at 400, 209. I mean, it's just good. It really is good. And then on the Superflow, it actually flowed really close to the same. So I didn't flow at 750 to get that number. So you see here at 750, it went 409. Then it backs up. I didn't even try doing that at Superflow. Time limited, really. Plus the Superflow takes forever to run. But the numbers are almost identical, a little bit better in some of these numbers. And then it's better here, 700 at least, that's what it says. And they're almost identical. So usually the Superflow reads a little bit higher than the Signs. It almost never reads lower. And in this case, it's virtually identical. So really good there. But let me show you what I'm talking about, the port design, because I know you guys want to see this. This thing's moving some air. This is an excellent head if you're a 440 Mopar guy for sure. But let me show you what I mean about the port. Here's what I mean about the port design. It looks like the guy that came up with this had been working on Mopars, but Mopar Hemis rather than wedges. And then he's like, you know what? Why don't I go ahead and redo a 440 Mopar? I bet you I could use the same stuff from the Hemi and it'll work. And it probably made this thing a lot better than what it was for sure, but it's not what you usually see. So let me show you. So look down these ports, and the light's gonna do a crappy job of capturing this. But what you can't hardly see is, see this top roof? It slants straight towards the short side, okay? And you can kind of tell it from up top when I go from this view. You can see it slanting down there. See how it slants down? So straight slants down. That's very unusual. Then the floor is almost flat. It starts off here, dips down, so it doesn't go straight across. It actually dips and then comes up over the short side. This is kind of what it looks like. Crappy drawing, but you get the idea. Slant, got a little, it dips down, then over the short side. A Hemi typically looks something like this. This would be a cutaway view. In other words, if I cut the head in half like this is what you'd see. The Hemi has very little short side. Usually they come straight up and just down. And this part's almost straight too. Very similar to what this is. Now, why is this different? This is a 15-degree head. So traditional small block Chevys and even your Mopars from the factory, or since they're low port, they kind of look like this. The floor goes like this, a little hump over the short side, and this goes this way. They might give a little bit more less radius here, but that's pretty much it. On small block Chevys and all other, even LSs for that matter, when they do a 13-degree head, what they typically do is they have a longer short side. So this being the short side. So this being kind of short, it's much longer because they raise up the port. And this port's raised up quite a bit. But they raise it up, but look what they do to the roof. It's almost flat and then makes the curve with the short side. So as these are kind of curving, they curve kind of together. That is not what happens at all with the B1. It's not following it. It starts tightening down right here. So what happens is there's no short side. So if you were to port one of these, I'm gonna tell you a tip for these. Don't take off the short side height. Don't. Because of the 15-degree angle and what it's got, if you start mowing this down, you're gonna kill all your low lift flow and you're only gonna gain very, very little at peak. Because of this, the air tries to separate. It's trying to jump because you're making it jump. So, I mean, I've still done a crappy job, but really the short side looks more like this. So it's gonna eventually jump that. You laying it back more is gonna make your low lift suck because at low lifts, that curve helps the air come around and that's where it's better at. So you knock that off, you hurt your low lift flow, but peak flow is much better. That gets back to this. That's why it backed up. So you go 409 and it starts backing up. And it's not horrible, but that's where it's separating. At the higher lifts, higher air speeds, it's jumping that short side. So as a porter, what can you do about it? Really not much. Kind of is what it is. Now, I know I probably didn't give you as much information, and these Mopar guys are gonna beat me to death on this because they've got so much more knowledge on the B1 head. This thing's a bad dude. I want you to understand that completely. Of all the 440 Mopar heads I've ever seen, this one, bad dude. This is gonna make some power. So, is it as good as a Hemi? I don't think so, but it's a good deal. This is a runner, so definitely keep up. I don't know how much expensive it is. I'm sure it's not cheap at all. All I had to do was port it. So, but I don't know why Mopar didn't do this to begin with. You guys have so many more advantages. One, you had shaft rockers from the factory, so why couldn't they? They could have just slid down your rocker on the shaft and had it where you wanted. They could have moved everything over from the beginning. So I don't know why. But anyway, guys, remember, I'm no Superman. I appreciate all of you. You guys take care.